I'm building a full-sized Lego pool table for less than a real pool table costs. That is because they are simply out of my budget, and no alternatives come close to offering the same quality of experience yet. However, I have a feeling this won't go as planned. And that is mostly due to my material of choice being Lego. Starting with the size of these things, because building at this size means it will require a huge amount of Lego pieces, which are not cheap. And it turns out that the dimensions of an actual pool table are fairly close to those of my former Lego table. Yes, I destroyed my precious Lego city that I worked on for over a decade to give this crazy idea a go. So there's no going back now. For a functioning pool table we need 3 things. Pool balls, a cue stick and a table obviously. Or maybe it's 4 things, with the last one being the confidence not to mess it up. There is no way I already messed this up. I bought all of these base plates thinking they'd have the same color as the 2 I already had lying around, but well, they are different shades of green. These base plates already set me back 240 euros. And now I needed another 2. But in the meantime I made a sketch of the pool balls. And there it is. To make the inner structure as robust as possible, I used as many of these so-called snot bricks as I could. I will try to take it easy with the many Lego terms. But these kinds of bricks are just so useful that I'll guarantee you'll see them repeatedly throughout this video. Building a ball out of Lego is one of the most impossible jobs ever. And it will never be perfectly round, as I will experience later. But for now I was trying to find the right balance between roundness and strength. What I've done here is actually made it less round. I made this critical decision because the last thing I want is the balls disintegrating during a game of pool. And after I built the triangle rack using lots of plates and a hinge in each corner, I built up the entire set of pool balls using the same reinforced design. And with that, the first chapter has been completed. But this was by far the easiest of them all. I still had no clue what I was going to put myself through during the pool table build. But first we need a cue stick to see if these pool balls are even close to usable. So, I'm building a pool table, and I know how the game works. But I also remember there to be lots of different variations, and oh boy does it confuse me. There is billiards, snooker and pool. And within the name pool there is 8-ball pool and English pool. But then everything still falls under the name of billiards. Though every different variation has different sized balls, there are multiple types of tables, some have pockets, others don't. All I know is I am building a pool table to play 8-ball pool, because that's what I'm familiar with. And I don't think much can go wrong with the cue stick. It's just a long bit of wood, or plastic in my case. I had the brilliant idea of using tires to extend the cue stick, but well, it didn't work out as wonderfully as I'd hoped. Therefore, I also constructed the remainder with plates and snot bricks. And with that, the cue stick is completed too. Now we can start on the biggest challenge of them all, the pool table itself. But before that, I think it's a good time to check if we can play a little test game, now that we have the necessary utilities. However, after missing on the first 2 tries, I still couldn't get a proper opening shot. Just doesn't seem to do all that much. Maybe it's just the first shot, also known as the break shot. Let's try this. That already looks a bit better. Even though it just seemed to work fine, I still was under the impression that everything wasn't working as it should. Therefore I made minor adjustments to whatever I could think of, like the tip of the cue stick, and then I gave it another try. But I was starting to fear that the blockiness of the balls would ruin this whole project. Although that may be true, it could equally be that I simply need a bit more practice. Let's just leave this problem for later, because I now really need to start building the actual pool table. first step is to raise the entire playing surface. Step 2 is a bit more ambitious, but I need to make pockets. And that would preferably include an automated ball return system. That would be sick, wouldn't it? This is where this project really gets serious. I think the ball return system will be a hard and maybe unnecessary challenge. It isn't even a feature on most of the pool tables. But hey, I'm always open for an extra challenge. But before we can get to all that, there is still a lot of work to do. And after I removed 10 years of dust from this table, I was ready to find out how well the foundation plates would line up. And it was almost perfect, with the emphasis on almost. I somehow planned to build this whole thing from start to finish within my week-long autumn break. But as I was nearing the end of my holiday at this stage, I think it's pretty evident that my build schedule wasn't anywhere near realistic. I really only did some prep work up till now, and I only just started on the table itself. Therefore, I still had no clue whether this was going to work out. But at least I was enjoying the build, and that's what it is all about. After the holiday, I had an exam week coming up. So I had to stop construction for a whole 3 weeks. Time management really isn't my strongest point. You know, when you think, oh, this task will just take me 2 hours, but then it ends up taking double of that and your entire day is over. Yeah, that's me all the time when I'm studying. But luckily I made it through. After I finished my last exam that week, I raced to the nearest store and got myself the remaining 2 base plates in the correct green color. There we go. I cleared out the old ones, which, funnily enough, still had price tags on them. Alas, prices have doubled since. But would you look at that? I think it was worth it. However, the heavy spending wasn't over just yet. I still had to order parts to build up the sides of the pool table, for which I'm building a prototype here. But this is where a bit of a problem lies. You see, these new base plates are in a color called bright green. This shade is way more exotic than the other available greens. Therefore, this was bound to get expensive, which wasn't a bright development for me, because I was desperate for this to be cheaper than a real pool table. That was the main objective after all. Without parts, there won't be a pool table. And I'll get to the full cost at the end. But mercifully, there is something that might brighten my day. The automated ball return system. I'm excited for this. So, there are 6 pockets. My plan is to create a track on each side for the 2 corner pockets and 1 slope in the middle for the center pocket. So that's 3 tracks in total. I suppose no one wants to go by every single pocket after a game of pool when it can also be automated, right? Whatever, I just really wanted to incorporate this premium feature, if you can call it that. Therefore, I began by creating the angled tracks that will eventually lead the balls to the collection base. And funnily enough, I'm using the Technic bricks from my dismantled Lego skateboard, which was my previous project. That really is the beauty of Lego. You can build whatever you want, destroy it, and do that process all over as many times as you want. So maybe I'll see these pool table parts back in a boat or whatever I may build next. This also made me realize that maybe I shouldn't worry all that much about the cost of this thing. But those costly parts surely won't disappear from the back of my mind that easily. And there is another problem with this, because sure, you can reuse those pieces, but am I really ever going to dismantle this thing once it's finished? I don't know. Those are really hard decisions. And let's not overwhelm ourselves with them, shall we? After a failed first test, where the ball didn't roll all the way down the track, a simple height adjustment seemed to have done the trick. However, the low speeds were a bit concerning, and it seemed like the balls were catching on the side rails. But I won't bore you with the footage of that change, because it had precisely zero effect in the end. How do I say this? I do not have the best track record when it comes to finishing projects to full perfection. Last time I built a skateboard out of Lego, and let's just say it was a very painful process, and it had a ton of flaws. Looking back with my current knowledge, I believe I could have done so much better. But the truth is that you can only learn through mistakes. That's hard to accept as a perfectionist, and during the course of this build I also noticed some flaws that really bothered me. The fact that the pool balls just cannot be more round due to the shape of Lego bricks still bugs me, because I just don't know if they will roll well enough for the final product. When I come across unsolvable problems like these, I now believe it's best to try and find an external solution, or just live with it. And luckily, in this case, an external solution was my savior, because these slopes that I attach to these sidewalls are able to redirect the motion of the balls into these sloped tracks. In fact, it worked so brilliantly that I also added it to the other ramps as well. After that, I built up the ramp on the other side of the pool table using the same method as before. However, I started to run low on Technic pieces, so I built up the side rails using ordinary Lego parts. And just like that, we have a ball return system. Though I still wasn't particularly satisfied with the balls not reaching the end of the ramp. What if I just raise the entire playing surface, being the green base plates? Then these rails will also have to be lifted to match the height, obviously, and then, as you see, the balls will, hopefully roll better. I suppose what I'm doing here is a bit too radical, but nevertheless, even raising the ramps by just 2 bricks makes quite a big difference in steepness. And if we are raising the ramps, then the surface itself also needs adjusting. This was a rather big operation. I'm speeding through this, but removing those base plates isn't an easy job. And there we have the difference. Will it be enough? Well, let's just see. The left side starts off strong, eventually reaching the endpoint. The right side seems to have a weaker gravitational field, and the track down the middle has no problem at all. It's not perfect, but I'll just take it as it is. I don't have the pieces to raise it even further. I used to regularly play a game of pool at my high school to kill the time between lessons. It is where I discovered this game, and it was so much fun. However, they have since decided to renovate the school, and now it's gone, I guess. Nowadays, everyone just stares at their phone screens during their off hours. Playing a game of pool was just better in my opinion. It really is a shame it's gone. This actually is one of the biggest reasons I've decided to take on this project. And it is quite a remarkable game to play, honestly, because not many people have a pool table at their disposal in their area, let alone have such a massive object at home. Then my packages started to arrive, and I forgot how much I actually ordered. What I'm holding in my hands right here already is about 150 euros. Yeah, these big plates are pretty expensive, but for that price you do get something. Because within minutes it looked so much closer to being finished. But we're also not that close just yet. When I was constructing the sides, I discovered this track was still loose. And while demonstrating that, I heard a concerning sound. Ah, there it is. This is something that I had not thought through. Luckily for me, the problem was only on the side, and therefore easily fixed. The word easy also best describes how I secured the rails in place afterwards. But the preceding fiasco gave me a bit of a scary thought. I realized that if a base plate or its support would collapse when everything were to be built up, it would require stripping down the entire pool table just to secure it back in place. And with how I'm constructing the sides right now, that definitely wouldn't be an enjoyable task to get my hands on. I think I could describe myself as pretty chaotic at times. What I mean by that is I always have a planned out idea of how I vision the end product. hence why I work in an order that seems logical to me. I now got myself in an interesting situation where I forgot to add these modified 1x1 bricks in each corner when I was building up the white walls. But I still won't need them anytime soon. It just popped into my head like, oh yeah, I'll need those sometime later on. It is really enjoyable to work in a sequence that best suits you, but it sure can be annoying at times. Especially when I'm jumping from one thing to the other, sometimes not even completing what I was working on, because I'm too excited to do the next step. The reinforcements of these sides weren't all that interesting. So I was all in when I allowed myself to start constructing the cushions. Those are the walls in the same color as the playing surface, where the balls rebound against. The cushions on a pool table are angled, because this ensures more efficient energy transfer. My research also said that the angle helps for consistent rebound, meaning that you can always expect a similar effect when the balls hit at an angle. I somewhat doubt whether angled cushions will make a noticeable difference when the pool balls itself aren't even close to round, but I presume we can only find out by giving it a try. Once I found a design for mounting the cushions that proved successful, I spent all evening building dozens of copies of the same structures. And the next morning I could immediately get to work bringing them together with green plates. The whole concept of Lego is that after you have had fun building a set, you can tear it all down and build whatever you want out of these colorful plastic pieces. It is my mission to take Lego building to the next level, because I constantly find things in my life that I find annoying, for which I desire a change. Or just things that I'd love to own, like a pool table for example. And I think everyone has those longings. But what if, instead of spending your money on something that you might not truly need in reality, you instead would just build your very own version of that thing using your old Lego bricks? If that sounds good to you, I would encourage you to subscribe, and I will try my hardest to make it happen. Absolutely no pressure. The problems just kept on coming, and these dancing sides concerned me, because the construction for the cushions only holds onto the sides. And the last thing I want is a total collapse of the pool table when you try to rebound a ball against the cushions. I therefore put a lot of effort into reinforcing the areas where the sides attach to, as well as adding brackets to the playing surface to hold the cushions in place. With the reinforcing completed, I rushed to finish the cushions for roughly half the pool table. This was tougher than I had expected, due to an unexpected shortage of these thin one-wide plates. But I had no time to spare, because my cousins were coming over the following day. They would be the first ones to try out this Lego pool table, except they themselves didn't know about anything yet. To my surprise, my cousins took little time getting accustomed. Despite only being able to use 2 of the 6 pockets to score, we still managed to play several entertaining matches against each other. We were starting to get the hang of it, and my cousins even pointed out some mistakes overlooked by me. Everything was going well until this happened. But within a minute we were back at it again, and we honestly could have kept going all day long. Now that I got the pool table tested, I could start the final stretch towards the finish line. But before that, my cousins left me with some feedback that was really valid. The most obvious request was a stronger cue stick. We also found that the corner pockets were still a tad too small. There was an issue where the balls didn't roll down the tracks immediately. The sides were found a little fragile, and they found the entire table a bit too high. I began by investigating the cue stick, and in particular the front. However, I just couldn't come up with a proper solution to fix it. But after a fine lunch, I got back with a fresh idea, and I was able to reinforce the cue stick using some brackets. So that's the first thing ticked off the list. Next up, I got to widening the corner pockets by simply moving the whole structure away from the pockets by 2 studs. Then I went and did the same thing for the short side of the pool table, and while I was at it, I also tackled the ramp problem. Because while I couldn't increase the height of the entire pool table yet again, as that was a complaint as well, I instead lowered the corners of the playing surface, as they reached a bit too far into the pockets compared to a real pool table. And because I don't fancy cutting Lego plates, I think this is a decent solution. To reinforce the sides, I just added more of these lovely snot bricks, and when it came to the cushions, the most relevant change was removing the weak points from the corners. As well as correcting a spelling error, I seem to have managed to solve most of the errors issued by my cousins, except the last one. But hey, there will always be another solution for short folks. Now it was time to finish this thing for good. I won't bore you with the same process over and over again, as I already put myself through that. But it actually started to look like a genuine pool table now. However, just when I thought it would be an easy leg to completion, I ran into an issue. And I knew this was coming.
I'm out of 1 white plate. Oh, I should have ordered more of these.
I still had this entire stretch unfilled. Drastic times require drastic measures, so I searched everywhere, and I mean everywhere. All of my storage bins, beautiful display sets, interesting old creations. Yes, that is Donald Duck doing the switch dance. As a last resort, I even searched my sister's birthday present that I gave her this year. Not only did this hurt myself, it also made my sister a bit cross. But even with all the effort, it still wasn't enough. Therefore, a good night of sleep was my best bet. And the next morning, I was determined to do the impossible. So not only did I tackle the beach once again, but I also revisited all the storage bins, which revealed that in fact I'd been too hastily. You really don't work optimal when you're tired then. At least I got to learn that lesson once again. I could smell the finished product now, but before we got there, my dad pointed out that the middle pockets still looked a bit flat. Especially the 90-degree corners looked a bit odd. So I managed to fix that by placing the corner plates at an angle. Now all that was left was the decorating, because it must also be somewhat fancy looking. Therefore I tried to make some woodwork style details. This is where that tiny modified brick from earlier shows its necessity, as it is there to hold the pillar onto the corner. Once I was happy with the design, it was time to copy it to all the other corners. And that's it, I guess. I started this build on the 1st of November 2024.
And today is the 26th of February 2025. And oh boy, has this been a project.
Let's see how much this mega project cost me. But before that, we need to see if this Lego pool table even works. Otherwise, I would have just wasted my money. After the not so brilliant break shot, I managed to do something extraordinary, at least as far as my competence level goes. And then, by pure coincidence, I found a solution for my long-lasting problem of how to get a good break with these Lego balls. Like I mentioned 100 times before, these balls aren't particularly round. Therefore, I think they don't transfer energy between themselves very efficiently. Hence why the cue ball cannot afford to lose energy on its way towards the formation of balls.
Not again.
So the cue ball simply needs to be a little closer to the other balls for the break shot. Besides that, there really were no other major difficulties. After some much needed practice and a couple of nicely executed shots, I challenged my sister to decide once and for all who is the better pool player. Now the price I had to pay for this crazy project. So I paid 261 euros for the green base plates. The pool balls cost me 35 euros and the extra pieces to finish the exterior set me back another 451 euros. This all comes down to a total of 748 euros and 70 cents. Just to be clear, this does not include the other used Lego bricks I already had in my inventory. Nonetheless, it's a hefty price tag. So how does it compare to a real pool table? Well, an average pool table costs between 1,000 and 5,000 euros. So I'm happy to say that I actually achieved my mission here. I built a fully functional pool table for less than a real one costs. Yeah, it might be less perfect, with the balls doing nothing near what you expect them to do in some instances. But it sure is a ton of fun, and I couldn't be more happy with my achievement. As for the match against my sister, well, I eventually pocketed the 8-ball.
That means I've lost.
So my sister won. But maybe she deserved that, since I stole parts of her birthday present to build this. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.